And welcome back. Well, on to the next video in our series of our 2012 Red Ram, otherwise known as Candy Apple or Project X, into its rebuild. And if you remember in a previous video, there's a section of the Rack and Pinion, the power steering rack here, that's leaking. So we went ahead and ordered a replacement. It's here, along with some new outer tie rod ends. They're here as well. So I think what we're going to tackle today is we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to see about getting this steering rack replaced because, obviously, as you've seen from the previous videos and you can see now, the engine's missing. So, easy access to everything we could ever want to get this rack out of here and get it replaced. Might as well take advantage of the situation and go ahead and replace this unit since we're not fighting with the engine. Now, when we get the old rack dropped out of here, before we put the new rack in, we're going to come through and kind of clean this lower cross member up a little bit and try to get rid of some of this dirt at least. And maybe, we got a little bit of caked on dirt, like I said, on the cross member on the sides and a little bit underneath the battery box. It's not too terrible. The other thing that we had done, as we commented on in the previous video, we went ahead and had the AC system recovered inside of this truck. And you can see that we've got a fitting on our high side right now. And I checked the low side as well, but I'm only checking the high side just for the sake of checking it. And you can see in our manifold gauge set here that we pretty much have 0 PSI. And I did actuate the Schrader valve on the low side as well, just to, again, double check it. Because you definitely don't want these under pressure when you go to crack these loose. But now that we verified the system has been recovered, it is completely empty at this point. Now, a lot of what you're going to see us do on this truck, on top of what's already been done, is that we're taking advantage of the situation, kind of one of those while we're here type moments, and just replacing certain things. So we went ahead and ordered a new condenser, which means we'll have a new AC condenser / transmission cooler, because this is all in one. You can see from our lines here that these are our transmission cooling lines at the top of this condenser. And then our 2 air conditioning lines are right here in the middle and one down here at the end. Looks like our liquid line comes down here at the end. And this is either the suction line or the discharge line. I can't remember off the top of my head. I know the skinnier line is the liquid line. And the 2 lines going to the compressor, I believe one is suction and one is discharge. But either way, we're going to get our condenser / transmission cooler disconnected and out of here. We're also going to go ahead, since we have new power steering hoses as well. We did order a new AC compressor while we're here, since we're putting a new compressor in, and we've ordered the suction line and discharge line as well as a complete AC service kit. And I'll show you that here when we get to that point. But basically, we have all the O-rings and all the replacement seals for our entire AC system. The only line I could not find and I could not get, and I do have an email alert set up for it, is I'm trying to find this liquid line. I found it online at one particular place, but it was local pickup only, and it was down in Texas. So we're still kind of looking for this liquid line. But we did get the suction line and the discharge line. We got a new AC compressor as well as the condenser and all new seals. So we're just going to be disconnecting and taking all of this out of here, getting it out of our way, making it, again, easier to access the steering column that we want to, a steering rack that we want to replace, as well as when we go to drop the engine in. So also, again, we went ahead, like I said earlier, and ordered a new AC compressor. Not that there's anything wrong with this one, but it is high mileage. It has been in here for quite a few years, and since we're putting a new condenser in it and new lines in it, might as well go ahead and just take the opportunity to drop a new AC compressor in while we're at it. So we'll get all this disconnected and out of here. We're going to get our power steering reservoir and pump and all its hoses, as well as the power steering cooler disconnected and out of here as well. And then once we have all that done, then we'll start looking at what we need to do to get our rack disconnected. Now, one thing I did do, I worked a little bit ahead of time on this, and just to show you what I'm doing in order to keep that steering wheel from turning. It's not crack loose yet, so it's not an issue, but you can see we just looped the seat belt through the bottom of the wheel. You can either do it this way, or if you've got one of those fancy, like looks like a really, really long kind of caulking gun that will, you know, pin itself against the floor and or the brake pedal, and then grab a hold of kind of the bottom of the steering wheel. That'll also hold it, and this way works as well. Just feed a little extra steering seat belt lap through it and click it in place, and that'll keep it from going excessively left or right. Because what we want to do is, once we have the steering, the intermediate steering shaft disconnected from the steering column, we don't want the steering wheel to free spin in such a way that it does a complete revolution or goes too far one way or the other, because it could damage and break the clock spring inside the steering wheel. You know, that'll give you problems with your airbag and problems with accessing your buttons on the steering wheel and the whole 9 yards. So again, this will just kind of down and dirty. This will keep it from moving too far in any one direction once it's disconnected. And I'm going to have to look it up on the book here real quick. And of course, that's the intermediate shaft you see here, where it's got this kind of this little bit of a U-joint in it. This seems fine. It doesn't look like there's a lot of excess play in there. That joint still seems pretty solid, so I don't see the need to replace it. We'll have to crack this loose and maybe even crack this one, the top bolt, loose, and see just what we need to do in order to be able to get this to slide off of here. Now, it is kind of keyed in the sense that if we look at the replacement steering rack, and this is the Cardone unit. This is not a rebuilt unit. This is a new unit. I did get this from Rock Auto. Why Cardone? Well, Rock Auto had it and it was available. And it was decently priced as well. You can see the shaft on here actually has 2 flats. So that collar could technically go on either direction. But you'll notice there's only one side of this that has the little half moon cutout in it, so that retaining bolt can go in. So that intermediate shaft can only fit on here one way, in such a way that you can get that bolt back in place. I'm just going to put that cover back on that one. And like I said, it did, I will say that when it showed up via FedEx, the box did have some external hits to it. It wasn't, it did take a little bit of a beating, but I'm not seeing any issues with the unit itself. No dings, no scratches, nothing along that nature. Obviously, we won't know 100% if this is okay until we can get everything reassembled, get it powered back up, and then go to test it. But obviously, if we run into an issue, then we could always drop it back out of the vehicle and, see about getting yet another replacement. But it looks good to me, so we're going to run with it for now. And what we're going to do, like I said, what we're going to do next is we're going to see about getting these lines cracked loose. Now, this line here for the air conditioning line, this manifold you see here that goes in our condenser, this piece is going to be kept. This will transfer over to the new condenser. The lines that we purchased only stop here at this block. And this couple, I think this AC coupler, as they call it, this is actually a separate piece, but this piece looked fine. I did do a quick vacuum test on this, and I'm not seeing an excessive leak. But when the system was recovered, there wasn't very much refrigerant in it. And I think that may be because ever since we got it, the low pressure side there, the cap's been missing, which means somebody has been fiddling with the system. And these valves, over time, these Schrader valves tend to leak, especially if those caps are missing. So it could just very well be that the system could have bled down just because that service cap was missing and that valve has probably gotten weak. So no harm, no foul there. Like I said, we've got new lines coming in, so they'll come with a new Schrader. If we can't get this liquid line, I did order an AC service kit, and we'll just replace that Schrader valve as part of our preventive maintenance. But either way, I'm rambling. Well, let's get some. I'm going to get some tools out here, and the first thing I'm going to do is just break these AC lines loose off of this manifold. Now that we know the pressure's gone, and then we'll look at getting these transmission lines off next. Which, if you pull these plastic caps out of the way, there's a little like a kind of like a C-clip or a horseshoe clip. When we get to doing these, I'll bring it back and see if I can show that to you. So one moment, let me get these lines broke loose and I'll bring you right back. And welcome back. So just to show you here, we've got our first bolt off. And these are 13 millimeter nuts that hold these pieces onto this coupling piece, which then goes into the condenser. So far so good. They're breaking free, and as you can see there, obviously, and again, that's why we double checked it. We want to make sure that lines are completely discharged. So we got those two disconnected, which is, as you saw, kind of dropping our condenser, getting it more out of the way. And now what we're going to concentrate on is getting these metal clips out of here so we can get our transmission lines disconnected. Again, when we get to it, we'll disconnect this coupler and it'll cross over to the new condenser, but be a little while before we're to that piece. The other line we're also going to disconnect is right back there on the block. There's a nut in the center of it, and what happens here is hopefully you can see that. You can see how that's kind of got a notch on one side. So this big low side line here kind of has a bracket on it that has a lie on it, and it comes over and goes on top of the liquid line, and it uses that one bracket to kind of hold both lines in place. So let me do that. Let me see about what we're going to need to get these clips out of here. I think we could just do this with possibly just a small pocket screwdriver, and I'll bring you right back when we work on getting one of these clips out. One moment. And welcome back. So I'm going to see if I can get one of these clips off to show you what I'm talking about. There's a little recess right here, just a little small flat bladed screwdriver. I'm sure there's probably a more proper tool to be using to do this. Now, these, if you watch other mechanic shows, are also called Jesus clips, meaning that they're kind of under a little bit of pressure, and if you don't watch what you're doing, they tend to want to fly out, shoot across the shop, and you say the word, "Oh Jesus," and you'll probably never find that clip again. So you just want to be careful when you're rocking these out of their holders. You just kind of want to keep up with where it's going, and hopefully you can see that we've kind of pushed the end of this one clip out of this point. So that's what it is. So what we want to do next is now just grab this clip and work it the rest of the way out. Let's see if I can actually just grab that. No, I can't grab it at this point. Not with my fingers, not without having the assistance of a tool in here. There we go. We're getting more of that clip out. As you can see, I think it's out enough now that I can just grab it, and there we go. So there's your clip. Very important. You want to make sure that when you put these in, that these seat, that basically you've got your transmission line seated all the way, and you definitely want to put that clip back in. Otherwise, you're going to set yourself up for kind of a bad day. We're definitely going to put those in Ziploc bags so that we don't lose them. And once that clip is out, we may have to wiggle our line here a little bit. I'll tell you what, let me do this one because these are pretty rigid. Well, I'll say they're pretty rigid. That's kind of what's holding them together right there. Is this block with these two lines in it. Let's see if I may need both my hands to work this line loose. Yeah. Okay, so what we could potentially do is that we'll get the other clip out the bottom here and either wiggle the condenser away from these lines or wiggle the lines themselves away from the condenser, of course, once this bottom one is free. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to pull this plastic dust cap back. We're going to get that other clip out of the line on the bottom, and I'll bring you back in one moment. And welcome back. So you can see, again, once you get everything lined up and you have that retaining clip out, these will pop straight out. You can see that we have our condenser out, just kind of dripping and draining into our catch pan. At this point, we'll let that drain. We'll let that drain for a little while. Now, what we will do is, and I haven't done it yet, but in order to keep the inside condenser from being excessively exposed to the environment, for the air conditioning system. Once we get that back block disconnected and get those lines off, then what we'll do is we'll just I'm just going to put it like a little cover. I don't have the little plastic or rubber plugs to put in there. I may just put a little cover, a little piece of painter's tape over it, just to kind of keep that that opening sealed off, obviously, until we're ready to come in here and put our new lines and compressor and everything on. But obviously that won't be until we get the engine and everything back in here first, because we can put the engine in and work around getting these lines in. It's not going to block our process. If you're familiar with the way these two lines run, they actually run over here and get held into a bracket that bolts into the intake. So it's not really going to, with the engine in place, I guess is what I'm trying to say, it's not going to be too much of a pain to replace these lines and that compressor. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to crack that nut back there loose that you see on the firewall and get the remaining of these air conditioner lines out of here. And as you can see, at least with that condenser out of here, we've opened up a lot of space that we can now just cleanly step into our engine bay here. So let me get that nut broke loose on the back of that firewall, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see that we got that bolt out. We got our lines disconnected from our firewall. And that little piece you're seeing right there has the two Allen screws either side of it. That is your expansion valve. And a new one of those valves did come in the kit. So we'll be replacing that while we're in there. So what this truck is essentially going to get is, provided we can find this liquid line, we may have to reuse this one. But in any case, it'll get new expansion valves, new AC lines, new compressor, new condenser, pretty much almost the whole 9 yards here. And obviously, yes, you can see that we've now got our compressor out of the way. Like I was showing you earlier, that line, just to show it to you, the one that goes back there on the back of the firewall, you can see, and I'm dripping compressor oil all over the headlights. But you can see how that just kind of fits in place and clips over the liquid line when it goes into that expansion valve, and this one piece holds both these lines in place. So I'm going to try to do a better job of, let's see here. Let's get that. There we go. That should keep that from leaking anymore. We'll get that little bit of a compressor oil cleaned up there. So the next piece that I think that we want to do is, since we know that we have these lines, is that let's see about getting the two lines broke free for our fluid, for our power steering fluid, and that way we can also get that over here into our drain pan as well, and to get that taken care of. So the nice thing is, once we're done, really the only piece that's going to be potentially used at this point is going to just be the pump, which we'll reuse that one. I don't see a need to replace it. It's just got a little bit of dirt on it, which is, you know, easy enough to clean up. And we'll go from there. So let's work on getting the lines cracked free from our steering rack here, and then we'll go from there. Now again, we've got these lines in as replacements, so if they're too much of a bear to remove, we can always go the old brute force method and just cut through the rubber on the lines, leave them attached, and just kind of go with it from there, because again, we don't need to keep these to reuse them. But I'll see if I got a line wrench big enough to put on there to crack those loose, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got a top one broke free. Unfortunately, that is a 20 millimeter, and all of my wrench sets, to include my line wrenches, forgive the noise, I got to straighten the camera. You can see my line wrenches go from a 19 on one end all the way up to, and then it jumps to 21, but that is a 20. But thankfully, it wasn't in too tight. We were able to crack it loose with the big old adjustable crescent wrench. The bottom one, however, looks to be a 19. But as you can see, we've got our big drip pan in there, and just have your drip pan ready, because as you can see, and you can obviously guess, once you crack that one of those two lines loose, you're going to start to get fluid to kind of spill out. So the next thing is going to be is get this bottom line broken loose, and that will free up the power steering pump and the cooler, and then we can just kind of get the fluid out of it and disassemble it, because again, we've got an all new line set. We've got the two low pressure lines and the one high pressure line coming in as a set. So I'm going to get this bottom one cracked free. I may be able to do it with you looking over the shoulder here. Hold on, I gotta turn the wrench and get a better bite on this. Yes, my line wrenches have adjustable heads on them. They'll fluctuate a little bit. Now, it didn't take. I'm gonna need. Let me see if I can get you set up, because I'm gonna need both my hands to do this. One moment. And welcome back. So I got you just kind of setting up on the camera's tripod here. Let me get this other line out of your way. Put that in our drip pan. Let it continue to drain. I said it before and I'll say it again, but ATF4, which is what Chrysler uses, at least in this transmission and I believe others. Yeah, that looks yeah, that's got a lot of play in it. Hold on, let me grab the 18. Let me just make sure that's not an 18. Again, we're going to be replacing these, so if it rounds off one edge a little bit, I'm not overly concerned. But again, there we go. Okay, so it's an 18. So my correction, the bottom one is an 18, not a 19. Again, at least on this truck. Yeah, that fits a lot better. Again, we have new line sets, but on the same breath, I don't want to intentionally break this either, in case we do have to reuse this line. Yeah, okay, let's see. Does that give me enough of a swing? If I turn this around, do I got enough? Yeah, I got enough swing that way. Okay, so what I usually like to do is just take and bump the top of the wrench with my hand, and as you can see, thankfully, this is not a rust belt truck. I feel my sympathies are for you if you're working in the rust belt. And this is a bit more of a painful process for you. I feel you, but as you can see here, it broke free pretty easily. And once that's loose enough, normally you can spin them by hand. And usually what I find helps is if you just grab the back of the hose, if you can get in here to it and just kind of wiggle it. And that'll help take some of the tension off of that fitting. And you can kind of just spin it the rest of the way out by hand. There we go. And we're going to let that drain as well. Now the new rack, it did come with replacement O-rings for the ends of these lines. But again, we've got new lines coming, which should come with new O-ring. Actually, we already have the new lines, so they should have O-rings on them. If not, we'll use the ones they included inside the kit as well. Okay, so now that we've got our lines disconnected, I'm going to work on getting the pump and everything else just kind of out of here, drained and out of our way for the time being. And then we'll come back and we'll look at removing our little pinch nut here, which should allow us to slide our intermediate shaft out of the way. Like I said, we may have to loosen up let me tilt you up here a little bit. We may have to loosen up the top one as well to get the free play we need to get this to move, but we shall see. So let me work on getting ready for this power steering gear out of here, and I'll bring right back. And welcome back. So we got our pinch bolt out. Now the book does say to discard this, so to me I guess that means they want you to replace it. It is Loctited in, as you can see, so it takes a little bit of oomph to get that to break free. But again, at least on this model, I will say, As you can see here, we're fortunate enough that if I now grab this and just kind of pick up on it, you can see slides right off that shaft. So we are now got the steering wheel disconnected from the inside, and if you remember from earlier, we've got our seat belt wrapped around our steering wheel just so it doesn't you know, free spin on us and do any damage to our clock spring. But so that shaft right there matches our replacement. We've got the 2 flats along with the concave section for the bolt itself. And like I said before, this joint in this intermediate shaft, you know, it feels good. It doesn't feel like it's not bound up. It's got plenty of free play. Yeah, I think that'll be just fine to kind of leave that one as it is. And let's see. So the next thing that we need to do, now that we've got our lines disconnected, we're disconnected from our steering wheel. On the inside of the cab is we are going to see about getting the outer tie rod ends disconnected from underneath here. And I'm going to see about doing something to see if there's enough room that we could potentially do it. It looks like there might be. Trying to do this without necessarily jacking up the front end of the truck, mainly because, as you can see there, we've got our transmission being supported by blocks, and if we jack up the front of the truck right now, we're going to be lifting the frame up, and then there's again, there's only so much wiggle room. I don't want to put that transmission at kind of an odd angle. So what I'm going to be doing is seeing if I can get those tie rod ends to kind of break free, because again, we got plenty of room. Again, since the engine is out of here, plus it's not a 4-wheel drive model, so we don't have front axles and we don't have the front differential to worry about, as well as, of course, obviously, once again, just stating the obvious, that the engine's missing, so we got plenty of room to work with. So once we get the outer tie rod ends loose from the knuckles, and we get these 2 big honking bolts here broke free, we should be able to just drop this axle as it is straight on the ground. It looks like we've got plenty of clearance to do it. We just have to clear the lower, I don't want to call it the A-frame, but the, oh, I forgot the name of it. Well, you can see it there. It's the lower control arm. Not control arm, but I forgot the name of it. Oh, it's drawing a blank right now. But basically, the lower assembly that your lower ball joint goes into, you can see our tie rod here kind of goes on top of that. But it looks like we've got enough room here that once we get this disconnected on both sides, get these bolts out and get it dropped, we should be able to shift it right, because we've got the most space here without hitting our column here. Shift this thing right to get this driver's side to clear, and then potentially just pick it up and take it out through the engine compartment, or just scoot it underneath the rest of the frame. Now, when I do this, and a lot of individuals said to jack it up just to have the freedom of space, but since obviously the engine's out and we're on kind of 20-inch tires, we've got a little bit of space to play with. Now, when I do this, what's going to happen is, and there's enough weight of the vehicle and tension on those tires that they should move, but again, just keep in mind that when I break those tie rod ends loose, there's nothing to stop the wheels from moving left or right from where they're at. And even if they do turn to the extreme left or the extreme right under their own weight, and again, I don't think they're going to do that, because again, there's enough of a weight of a vehicle on it to keep it from doing that. And also what I'm going to do is I'm probably just going to get a little bit of board and just put it between the tire and the rack post, just to kind of keep that, keep a little bit of that movement from potentially happening. Again, just something we want to be mindful of. Like I said, I did try to search to see if this was possible to do without jacking the vehicle up, and I only found a couple of posts where some individuals said, yeah, you can do it, and some individuals said, no, just go ahead and jack it up, and that way you get the you know, you get the freedom of space. But to be fair, the book says to jack the vehicle up as well and take the 2 tires out, so that way you can get to those, you know, those tie rod ends easier. And let me get you a shop light, because that's going to be horrible to try to see. But obviously, if you've done this before, you know what I'm talking about. You can see that we've got our outer tie rod end right there, and then there's our bolt that goes underneath of that. And the trick is going to be whether we can get that to pop free from the knuckle, or if we're going to have to kind of jack the truck up and take the tire off in order to get that to free up. Sometimes you can get it, if you're lucky, you can just hit what the part goes through, which is this outer part of this knuckle right here, and just shock it enough that you can get those tie rod ends to pop free relatively easily. And you know, sometimes you got to put a puller on them, but like I said, we'll try it. We'll see if we can get them to pop free. Great. If not, then we'll jack it up a little bit, at least, maybe to get enough of a weight off the front that we can get the tires off. But being mindful of obviously of the angle of our transmission here, so that we don't go too terribly high that we kind of offset how we're setting back there. We'll just have to keep an eyeball on it. But let me see if I can get these bolts free and see how these tie rod ends are going to cooperate, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our tie rod end loose on this side, or at least popped up out of the knuckle at this point. I'm going to leave that nut in until we're ready to take it completely out. But it is loose, as you can see there. It took a little bit. Those were in there. By the looks of them, they look like to be the factory ones. They've probably never been removed. You can see we got some hammer marks here. So I was always taught, and I used a little bit of Thor here. You just kind of hit what the part goes through. So hit it a little bit on the outside of the knuckle just to shock it. And then finally, again, since we're replacing these outer tie rod ends and not keeping them, you'll notice on the lower part of it, I threaded the nut on here just to help protect it a bit more, even though it doesn't really matter, we're replacing it. But you'll notice on the bottom of here, there's no threads. So I was able to kind of hit also on the bottom of this to help break the outer tie rod loose. But I'm just going to put that on there by a couple threads to help hold that in place. And then what I'm going to do next is come over here to the driver's side and see if we can also get that to pop free as well. Like I said, that took a little bit of effort. Unfortunately, the ball joint separator that I ordered does not go wide enough to accommodate the length of the threaded part of the shaft that goes through the knuckle. So it wasn't wide enough to grab up here and then push into the bottom to get that to free. Now, it is a little bit of a pain with the wheel still being on, because you don't have as much throw distance in here, but you know, like I said, we were able to at least get it to pop free. So I'm going to concentrate on the other side, and what I'm using to break the torque on it. I picked this up, and I want to say, yeah, this is a GearWrench. Got this on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description, but you can see this side's a 21 and a 24, and if you flip it, it becomes a 20 and a 22. And I want to say these were, in case you're curious, let's see. No, not that end, that end. So these are 21 millimeter, and you can see it does have a nice, pretty long length. So the nice thing is you can kind of grab it at the opposite end here and get some leverage, and at least this one broke free pretty easily. So I'm going to do the same thing on the driver's side, and again, all I'm doing is breaking this nut free, threading it almost to the bottom, giving it a couple of whacks on the knuckle and the outside here to shock it, and then alternating between hitting here on the knuckle and hitting here on the bottom of this. Now again, just be careful if you're going to do that if you've got a ball joint that doesn't have this hexagonal end on it, because again, you can see there's no threads on the very, very end of that, so there's nothing really to mar up or mess up. But again, just want to thread the bolt on there in case you miss swinging with the hammer, you know, you don't inadvertently catch a thread on the side. But if you're going to be reusing your tie rod ends, especially, you know, pickle fork, you probably wouldn't want to use that because that'll more than likely tear the boot, or get yourself a big enough, you know, ball joint, a ball joint separator that I can, you know, grab a hold of this and pop it out. Either that or just alternate between hitting here and between hitting here. But again, if you're going to reuse this, just put the nut on there to help protect the threads before you start whaling on it. Anyway, we're going to work on the driver's side here, and I'll bring right back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we're here on the driver's side. We've got our nut loose at this point for our outer tie rod end. And what I'm going to do is just like I did on the passenger side, I'm going to hit right here on this particular knuckle. There's a little bit of a raised area that kind of has a little imprint of a circle on it. I'm going to alternate between hitting there and hitting the bottom of the tie rod, just being mindful that I don't swing too low on the hammer and hit our tire. Again, a little bit of cumbersome. I get it because the wheel's in the way, and generally you just, you know, jack the front of the truck up and take the wheels off to give yourself some extra working space. But again, as I showed you earlier, just due to the issues with the way we got the transmission supported because the engine's out, makes it be a little bit of a pain. I'm not going to be able to show you as I do this, unfortunately. I did try, but I swing back and hit the camera too many times. But you get what I'm going to do. I'm just going to alternate between hitting here to shock it because the part goes through the knuckle, and then hitting up here at the bottom. So just one moment. And welcome back. So again, sorry I couldn't show that to you when I was doing it, but took a little bit of whaling because it's not an optimal angle to try to hit at it. But as you can see, we were able to get the driver's side to pop free. So I'm going to leave those lightly kind of bolted in place just to retain them. And then the next thing we're going to do is see if we can bust our big ones here loose, or big bolts here loose, and just happen to have the right socket. So it looks like that is a 24 mil for both of those. And then once we can get these at least loose, then I'll finish just kind of, again, picking up these tie rods and tie rod ends and getting them out of this, getting them out of the front left and right hand tires. And then we'll see if we can finish this rack out of here. So let me see about busting these loose. I'll try it with a breaker bar. If not, I'll just put an impact on it. So I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got these broke free. Now in the end, again, the convenient factor is, remember, this whole front of the truck is missing. So getting on here and be able to stand in here with the breaker bar is, at least for now, pretty easy to do. Now they will eventually start to spin, these nuts on the back. You can see right here, right where I got my thumb, I was able to just kind of hold those, and you can see the rack is fairly loose at this point. So now what we're going to do is just go through, take the rest of these bolts out of these outer tie rods in at the bottom, and then finish banging those tie rods out. And then, like I said, I think we'll have the room to shift it to the passenger side, to possibly get it to go that way. And like I said, hopefully we don't have to remove the tire on that side to get the throw. I think once we get these two bolts out here and we could just kind of go down on this, we might have enough swing in these arms just to kind of get it to, again, to maybe fall out the bottom. So let me see what we've got going on here, and I'll see if we can get this thing out of here while it's kind of at the ground level here. So let me play around with this, and I'll bring you back and kind of show you what either works or doesn't work. One moment. And welcome back. So it's loose, but it's a bear trying to get this thing out of here. It's just too long to get enough space to slide it this way, and you can get the tie rod to bend over and clear this tire and kind of come out this direction, but you can't get it over in far enough to get this mechanism to clear what it needs to clear in order to drop it down from the bottom, because you start to hit this bolt over here for this lower control arm up against the power steering unit. So we got a couple options. We could potentially just crack loose one of the outer tie rod ends, and that would drop the inner tie rod. That would drop the inner and the outer here on either the driver or the passenger side, and that would give us the clearance we need without having to jack the vehicle up. But I think at this point I'm going to need to jack up at least the passenger side here and take the tire out, and then that way the whole assembly can slide straight out of the passenger side this way, and that'll allow the driver's side to clear and kind of drop down. So I'm thinking that's where we're going to be headed. So I'm going to get a jack underneath this passenger side real quick. I'm just going to have to be mindful of what's going on with the transmission. Make sure that we don't pick things up too terribly high. We're going to have to keep an eyeball on that and get it up just enough to get the lug nuts off and long enough to pull the tire off and get the old one out, and then we'll put the tire back on and obviously lower things. But that's the way it's looking. It just isn't, like I said, there isn't enough space after getting the assembly, the inner and outer tie rod in, to pivot this way. It'll pivot this way and come out in front of the tire, but you can't get enough it to articulate the opposite direction on this side to get that side to clear the spring and everything. It's got to go out more of a straight fashion out of the passenger side, which I don't know, kind of sucks. Tried to avoid it, but it is what it is at this point, I guess. And I am going to get a jack underneath this tire and go ahead and see if I can get this side lifted up enough, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, where there's a will, there's a way. Okay, so you can see we've got it upside down. What was happening was the other mount, this mount right here, was hitting against, let me get you a shop light. You can't see anything. Okay, so this mount right here was hitting against this bolt. So what I thought of doing, and it worked in this case, was putting the rack back like it was, like as if it was going to be mounted or unmounted for the first time. Flip it upside down that you see here, and then feed it in here to the passenger side. Kick it out that way to clear the tire, as you can see there. And then as you feed this in, then the driver's side will clear over here and drop to the ground. Now all we got to do is pull it out, out from underneath, basically towards the driver's side, clear this brace here, and then we'll have the assembly out. We just got to be mindful that when we go to put it back in, that we're going to have to go upside down with it, slide it in here for the passenger side, and then as we turn it right side up, fish the inner and outer tie rod to go this way towards the driver's side. But like I said, doable. You just gotta, like I said, twist it upside down and do a little bit of a jangle puzzle with it. But I'm going to continue to pull this out, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we cleaned up our center cross member. Just used a little bit of Dawn dishwashing detergent, a little bit of water, and a kind of a blue scrubby sponge. And you can see the result of that. It used to be clear, or it's clear and sudsy, but so we just concentrated on this area here, because that's where we're going to put it. And then it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than what it was. And once we got done with the Dawn, then we sprayed it down with a little bit of spray away glass cleaner, just to kind of clear up some of the suds and such. Let's see. Of course, yes, we did change our drip pan. Got the one with our transmission fluid kind of off here to the side. So this is what I want to show you. You can see that we got both our old steering gear, as Chrysler calls it, and or Rack and Pinion, however you want to call it. and our new one side by side, just comparing the two. Yeah, they seem pretty spot on. Looks like it'll definitely do the job. The only thing I've done thus far is just manually turned the steering input there, just so that flat spot where the bolt goes will line up with how the old one was when we took it out. It does come with new rubber inserts for our nuts, as well as the insert the bolt goes through. We're going to get these cleaned up, and in order to aid in their installation around each one of those, we're just going to put a little bit of silicone paste, not a lot, just a hair around the shafts of all these, and that should aid in the installation inside of these new grommets. Let's see what else we've got going on here. So we took care of that. I did order a new pinch bolt for the intermediate shaft to rack and pinion there, or steering gear. Unfortunately, it won't be until next week, so once we get this installed and done, we'll just leave this disconnected. We'll leave the steering wheel wrapped up on the inside with the seat belt, just so nobody gets in there and kind of turns it. And then next week, when that pinch bolt comes in, then we'll just go ahead and get this replaced. But for now, we'll just leave it disconnected. Let's see. So what I'm thinking we're going to do is this. Oh, I wanted to show you this. This is what we're going to be using for outer tie rod ends. You've seen us use this product before. TTX, Train Tough Extreme is what they stand for. We've used their products, actually the front wheel bearings, when we replaced those in the first series, which was us getting it from the auction and getting it back on the road. Our TTX front wheel bearings. We're also using the rear sway bar end links are also TTX. So when I saw that these were available and they could get them, I went ahead and just picked them up for the fronts as well. So you can see that what comes with it is just a protective cap out of the box to protect your threads. You get a bag of hardware. Looks like you get a new jam nut, a new castle nut for hooking the outer tie rod into the knuckle. You also get a cotter pin to lock this castle nut in place, and you also get, pay attention to that one, a Zerk fitting, a grease fitting that we'll install into the top that will allow this joint to be serviceable. And then what we'll do is, once we get everything torqued down and done, we'll come by with a grease gun as probably one of our final steps to this install, and we'll fill this with a little bit of grease, just so it's not you know, I'm sure there's a little bit of grease in here from the factory, but just to make sure that it's not dry. Now, these are fairly stiff because they're new, and that's what I expect. Now, the old factory ones that we're dealing with here, they aren't terrible. They're not like flopping around, but you can see much easier movement in theirs. So they're just a little bit worn, but that's to be expected with the... These look to be original to the truck, so they would be the original 2012 tie rod ends, as well as 100-something thousand miles on them. But the reason why we're replacing, if you remember, I mentioned a comment about a leak, and if you look right here at the bottom of the old steering gear is where this is leaking. Now, to be fair, maybe we could have backed this little threaded section out, and there's probably like an O-ring or a gasket in there. But since it was leaking, and again, since we have the engine out, no better time to do it, we figured we would just go ahead and put a new one in it. Now, this is put out, but this one's made by Cardone. This is not a Mopar unit. The Mopar unit, I couldn't find it anywhere. I think I found it one or two places, but it was just absurdly expensive. Now, this is a new unit, as I mentioned earlier, not a rebuilt unit, so there is no core charge on this one. This one, I'll probably keep it around maybe for a little bit, just in case we need something off of it. I doubt it, but I'll keep it around for a little while anyway. So what I'm going to do is, and it looks like we've got enough room to do this, I want to see about getting this installed into the vehicle first without the tie rod ends on it. Once we get this kind of in place and held together, then what I want to do is, like I said, get it kind of tight where this is reattached to the frame. And then we'll come back out here and loosen this jam nut on this outer tie rod. And then we'll spin this free. And then we're going to count the number of rotations that we use to get this off of this tie rod. And that will give us the number of rotations we need to spin the new tie rods on. Now, I have looked at these, and if you can see that comparison there in the camera, they are pretty much the same length. So that should be okay to get us relatively close to the measurements of where these are at now. Now, will it be perfect? No. This truck will need a front end alignment once we get it all done and, you know, back on the road again. But for now, it'll get us close. It'll kind of get us to where we need to be. And plus, not having the tie rod ends on it when we go to install this should make this a little bit easier. We won't have this extra, you know, hunk of metal hanging off the side. So we'll leave the caps on it for now to protect it. And then we're going to work on getting this installed. Again, I'm just going to clean these up real quick. Put a little bit of silicone paste on the outside of them. Get installed in these bushings. And then we'll work on getting it back into the frame. So let me work on this and I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our beginning part of our mounting hardware crossed over to our new unit. And again, just a little bit of silicone inside of each of the sides of those rubber bushings will help those inserts slide in a lot easier. And in case I didn't mention it before, in case you're wondering, the non-nut side, in other words, just the guide, just the insert side goes on the front, and the side with the threaded portion of the bolt goes into will go into the back. And you can kind of see that there. Okay, so I'm going to work on next. Oh, and in case I didn't show you that part number for the outer tie rod ends, those TTX outer tie rods in earlier. There they are right there. And I will get you the part number for this Cardone unit here in a moment as well. Now, just remember that the part number I'm going to give you, this is representation for a new unit, not a rebuilt unit. But let me start working this thing in place, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I got the tripod kind of wedged in spot here now. I'll show you what I'm doing, but just like the reverse of removal, we've got it upside down, and we've got the passenger side kind of fed at an angle, getting around this tire and picking this up and shifting this forward, so that way this mount point over here doesn't hit up against our lower control arm bolt, and kind of gives us the ability to push this thing over as far as we need, so that way we can get the driver's side where it needs to be, the clear everything, and then we can, you know, turn it right side up, in a sense, is what we're doing. So once we get the driver's side where it is, you can see we can pull it out, and then we can just take this, rotate it around, bring this up, and we're pretty much where we need to be, kind of right there. I need to get this motor mount out of my way, and I can finish putting this into position. But you kind of, hopefully that kind of gives you the gist of it. And again, when I bring it back, I'll explain more of what I was doing over here in the passenger side. One moment. And welcome back. So with the installation, what I was doing there when it was upside down, again, fed it in from underneath the truck, so underneath the main cross member here. And then took the passenger side inner tie rod, shifted it this way to come this way in front of the tire. And then with it upside down, so that way these mounting bolts would clear this lower control arm bolt on the other side, was then able to shift it and basically push it as far over on the passenger side this way as we could. And then when we got it extreme this way and could get the outer tie rod end, or inner tie rod, to clear all the springs on the driver's side here, then brought it rotated it, brought it up, fed the driver's side in, and then started our frame bolt. So as you saw in the previous shot, we started upside down, fed passenger, got it to where the driver's side would clear, and then rotated it up into an upright position. So it's doable. It's a bit easier, yes, with the tie rods removed, and it looks like we've got enough space just to get in there to get the jam nut and the new outer tie rods in place. So I'm going to work on getting these bolts tightened up a little bit, and then I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got the driver's side jam nut broken loose for this side. So now what we're going to do is just count the number of times we can spin this off. So that's one. Tell you what, let me do this. I want to make sure I get a semi-accurate count here. I'm going to get a Sharpie, mark this, and I'll be right back. And welcome back. So we've gotten the jam nut for the passenger side here broken loose. And now what we're going to do is just count the number of turns we can back this off before the outer tie rod is detached from the inner tie rod. And just to help make it a bit easier, I just took a silver Sharpie and drew it across the jam nut as well as the outer tie rod, and that'll help us keep count. Let's see here. Let's see if I can balance that on my shoe. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, so about 22 to 22 and a half before it becomes detached. And then also what we can do is measure from the jam nut over, or just count the number of remaining threads. So what I'm going to do next is do the same thing. I'm going to get the jam nut on the passenger side and just kind of get it backed up to roughly about the spot it needs to be in. And then we'll thread the new tie rod on, just using, again, the number of the count that we got off of our old one. So I'll bring it right back. And welcome back. Well, you can see we got our tie rod ends in at this point. And truth be told, a bit of a bear trying to do this without raising the vehicle up. If you remember in the previous video segment, we figured out a way that we could get the old steering rack out and get the new one in. Now, when we put the new one in order to make it easier, we didn't put the tie rod ends on it. Now, as some of you were probably screaming at the screen, those tie rod ends are a bit meatier, a bit beefier than the factory ones. So it led for a problem and trying to put this thing back in without raising the vehicle. We ended up having to lower the steering rack again, put the tie rod ends on, and then Jenga this thing back into position. Now, the other issue we ran into, since those tie rod ends were a bit meatier than the factory ones, what ended up happening was we had to make a slight adjustment in order to shorten up the rack enough to clear everything to get it to where it needed to be, to get everything to fall into position. Which meant that on the passenger side, we actually had to spin this tie rod in further than what we wanted in order to get the length to get everything to drop in. Now, with that being said, since we knew that was going to throw things off quite a bit, we ended up doing this. So this is our factory steering gear, rack and pinion, however you want to call it. Chrysler calls it a steering gear. We measured from the back of this jam nut to the end of the threads. And now these jam nuts haven't moved since we only loosened up the outer tie rod. So we know these are relatively where they were. Now these are within a half a thread to about a thread, identical on both sides. So since we know that we didn't bother the driver's side any, we measured from the back of the jam nut to the end of the thread and duplicated that measurement here in the passenger side, probably within about maybe a half a thread to a thread. Now, is it perfect? No. And no matter what we do to this, it's not going to be the perfect because we don't have the equipment to do a proper alignment. So we know that even doing this job meant it's going to have to go for an alignment once we get the engine in it, once everything's back up and running, but that should make it pretty close as far as the adjustments between left and right here on the front. So with that being said, you can also see that we put our grease fittings in. Now those grease fittings are really small. It's about a 5/16 inch wrench. Do not tighten those down. No need to go full torque. Just tighten them in until they snug up, because we definitely don't want to break those off, because we want to make sure that we're able to put grease in there and continue to make those serviceable. So with that being said, we've got our driver's side, we got the castle nut torqued to factory specs, and we got the cotter pin they included in with the kit. Pretty neat looking cotter pin. What this does is this actually clips onto one of the castle ears in that castle nut and locks this in place. So on the passenger side here, we got it torqued up to factory specs, and we went a little bit tighter than factory specs because our cotter pin hole was being covered up. So we went a little bit tighter until it exposed itself. And we're just going to push this cotter pin in. And the way they make these cotter pins is kind of nice, because hopefully it'll end the argument for how to use a cotter pin. Because showing cotter pins on YouTube is about as blasphemous as showing welding or soldering. So again, we're going to put this in through the hole and the stud and just push this in until, and that got it. Okay, so I don't know if you heard that click, but that what reached over and grabbed like one of these little castle ears and locks that cotter pin in place and keeps it from pulling out. In order to pull this out, you actually have to get a little pocket screwdriver in here to bend this ear, this pin back out, but that'll lock it in. So now it's been torqued, it's been cotter pinned. The last couple of things that we need to do is tighten up our jam nuts, and then we'll shoot some grease into those fittings. Now, this, I already looked at it earlier. Remember, we turned this to make sure that it was facing the correct direction, which it is, and I can actually show you that here real quick. My camera battery's dying, so I'm trying to rush through this, but you can see that slides, the intermediate sash slides on nicely. It's lined up for that. Again, we did have to order a new pinch bolt because they want you to replace that pinch bolt whenever you take it out. And so yeah, we just got those two items to do here. Let me go grab a grease gun, and I'm going to go ahead and get these jam nuts tightened up. I'm going to grab a grease gun, and I'll be right back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our grease gun on our fitting up there. It's one of those lock type fittings with a spring-loaded clip on it. But I put a couple pumps in here already, and that dust boot has just started to move, so I think we've got enough in. I'm going to put a little bit more in there. Maybe you can kind of, yeah, I don't know if you saw that dust boot move a little bit, so that is enough in my opinion. That lets me know that we should have sufficient enough grease in there that we've got that dust boot to poof out a little bit. I don't want to put too much in there where, you know, it causes it to open up at some point and kind of start spitting the excess out. But with that being said, okay, I'm just going to put this grease gun down here to the side. So we've got our new steering gear or rack and pinion, however you want to call it, in place at this point. We've got our jam nuts torqued up. We've got our outer tie rods torqued back into our knuckles. We got the adjustment again where they're probably within about a half a thread to a thread of each other between left and right hand sides. Now we're not going to hook up the power steering lines to the pump. Obviously we'll do that once the engine's back in here and we're to that point in the game. So we're just going to leave these dust caps on it for now. And the pinch bolt that we need to get, that should be here Tuesday time frame, but we can get that taken care of. So what we'll do for now, we'll just leave that off as a reminder that that needs to be done yet, as well as we'll leave the seat belt, the steering wheel seat belted in place, just so it doesn't turn too far and, you know, and potentially break something. So with that being said, like I said, it was a little bit of a fiasco to do it this way, and just be mindful that it is a bit tedious. And I think the only way we were able to do this without raising this up is because, again, the engine's not in here. I'm actually standing or sitting down where the radiators and oil coolers and condenser and stuff would normally be. So we had plenty of access to do it this way, and wouldn't be able to, we might be able to drop this on the ground even with the engine installed. Yeah, strike that. Probably not, because the way we had to kind of rotate this and Jenga this into position, yeah, if I had to do this with the engine installed, yeah, I'd highly suggest just jacking up the front of the vehicle and taking the tires off, and that will give you the clearance you need to drop the steering rack and push it to, at least in my opinion, the extreme passenger side, because you got all this space here. You can go that way with it and then just drop it out from the bottom. Anyway, it was a cool little thing to try, just to see if we could do it without raising the vehicle, because again, you can kind of see our concern with raising the vehicle at this point, because where the transmission's at. But anyway, with that being said, it is done. We've got our new equipment installed, a new inner, so this rack is new, outer tie rods are new, everything's lubed, everything's greased. We got a little bit of work to catch up on this one yet. And also, at the beginning of the video, you saw us take out the bits of the air conditioning system, as well as the air conditioning compressor. Those are going to be replaced, as well as the condenser / transmission cooler we took out. That will be replaced as we get further into this project. Eventually, we will take these lines off here, off of the transmission, and get rid of this, because you can see here we did have that leak right here, kind of where they're crimped. And again, the reason for changing out the steering gear was because of the leak. Once again, that is right about there. Again, we maybe, to be fair, could have dropped that cap and replaced a seal or an O-ring, but you know, we're here. There's going to be a lot of things we do to this truck that we're going to be doing it just for the sentiment of, well, you know, while you're in there type deal. So with that being said, hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this showed you how maybe you'd want to do something, or potentially even not do something. So with that being said, I want to say thank you to everyone who has subscribed thus far. If you have not subscribed, please consider doing so. As you can see, we've got work done to this truck, but we've got a lot more to do. We've got a lot more cleaning to do on the inside of this engine compartment. And we just need to get prepped for, I think the next video will be taking cylinder heads apart and getting those prepped to be cleaned. The block has been dropped off at the machine shop, if I haven't told you that already. So we're just waiting for them to complete their work, and then once we get it back here, we'll start building that up. But with that being said, I'm rambling too much. I will let you go, and I will bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.